Hi everyone. Welcome to the assignment video for the proposal letter and final research project. Right now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the final research project, which is what you're going to be proposing. So actually they kind of go together. So what you'll need when you're watching this video is the handout called Proposal Letter and Final Research Project, which is in the Assignments tab, and it's also posted near this video. So hopefully you'll be able to find it. And the proposal letter is sort of a short document that is going to be proposing your final research project. So we're going to skip ahead to just talk about the final research project because even though the proposals due first, you need to know what it is you're proposing. So for your final research project, you're going to write a formal report on a technical topic of your choice. And the length requirement for this is a little bit malleable. It's about 8 to 15 pages, double spaced. If you do it 12-point double spaced, you're looking in the 8 to 15 page range. If you do it in a different format, it might be a different length, right? If you single space it, 8 to 15 becomes 4 to 7.5. I am not nickel and diming your word count. If you have a little less or a little more than the suggested length, that's fine. Think of it as a suggested length, not as a hard and fast rule. Basically, I want you to pick something that has a level of complexity that it takes around that length to be able to explore it. If it goes longer than 15, that's perfectly fine. This assignment used to be a 15 to 20 page length requirement, and it's shortened now. So the types of formal reports that you might think about choosing here are proposal, analytical report, recommendation report, feasibility study, scientific research report for those of you who do primary research, and magazine article, which is kind of a popular one because it's neat. You get to be a little artistic and design it and lay it out and make it look like a real magazine article. And it's another reason it's popular, I think, is because it's a good chance to try and explain something technical to a real layperson audience. But all of these are potential types of documents that you might write. If you have other ideas that you feel fit within the spirit of this assignment, you can absolutely run them by me. Business plan, some of you, if you're working on a startup, you might want to write a business plan or a marketing plan. That is completely within the scope of this assignment. You can do it. Some of you may have a really good idea for an instruction manual that you want to write for your student group or your lab or a class that you TA, and that is a great idea. Do run that by me. I'm not going to just sort of blanket say, okay, every instruction manual is approved, because a lot of the time people come to me with ideas for an instruction manual, and it's often a little too simple or not technical enough. And so that level of complexity and the level of technicality need to be there if you're doing an instruction manual. So when you run the idea by me, we'll talk about it. We'll figure out if it fits. So those are the types of documents. You can get very creative with the way you think about this. I had a student very recently who did her paper as a blog post, and that is something that people have done over these last 10 years or 12 years, presented it online as a blog post, but instead of really traditional paragraph format, she did it as a web comic. So it's a very long form web comic about wind turbines, 3-blade versus 2-blade. And she was going through and exploring strengths and weaknesses of both and teaching us about the energy efficiency of both, but all of it was in webcomic form. So, she was wondering, and this is a good question, hey, how does this fit within the 8 to 15 page length requirement? And as I looked at a rough draft of it, I said, this is fine as far as the level of complexity goes. You're drawing your own images. As far as I'm concerned, that's part of the length. So your images are part of the length of the paper, and she did go into a really decent level of detail about these, and so it worked out really well. So you can actually get really creative if you want to. You can also be very straightforward and very detailed if you want to. There's a lot of possibility here. The one type of report that I don't want you to do, even though it is a legitimate type of report, is an informational report. That is where you've gathered up all the information and you're presenting it to your audience. That is something that you're going to do in industry, in academia. You are going to do informational reports. So you might say, why can't I do that for this paper? I want you to go the next step. I want you to go one step further and to take what you think you're an analytical brain and apply that to what you found. So you're not just finding the information and presenting it, you're doing something with it. So it's going to be thesis driven in some way. And I know when we hear thesis, we think in a very writing one kind of way. Oh, does that mean first paragraph, the thesis is at the end of the first paragraph, and then I have to write the rest of the paper? No, not necessarily. Sometimes your thesis is your conclusion, and you don't come to that conclusion until the end of the document. Sometimes you have to spend the first 60% of that magazine article educating your audience on all the details, that's the informational report part, before you get into that analysis. So there's no rule about, hey, what's the ratio of informational to analytical? It just needs to be analytical enough to have that element where you're applying your thought process to this information that you found. So some people's, very anecdotally, I'll say some people's papers or projects are like maybe 70% informational and 30% analytical. Some flip that. They give us just enough information and then they take that data and they analyze it for the rest of the paper. And it really depends on what kind of thing you're doing. We will go into each of these different formats and what they're all about. And I have some resources for you about those as well. So also, if you want to look at examples, and we do have an assignment to look at examples later in the semester, but if you want to get a jump on it, you're like, I really want to see some examples of these different kinds of reports. On the Canvas page, pages, so it's under pages, and then it's examples, final research projects. If you go in there, I've categorized them, I haven't grouped them, but I've tagged them as the type of report they are. So you'll be able to see, oh, this one is a proposal, this one's a magazine article, this one's a recommendation report. And so you can take a look at the different formats and see which one sings to you, which one you really think might be a fun format for the information that you're trying to convey. If you're having trouble thinking of topics, don't worry, it's still early. There's a lot of different stuff out there. Lauren has some ideas for you too. So when you hear from our subject librarian, she might give you some ideas as to where to find some interesting stuff. Think about your classes and stuff that you're learning that you're really into. You might say, I'm really into this thing that I'm learning in this particular class. Maybe I can research it further and write about it. You might, if you are doing research in a lab and you're on an academic track, you really want to go to graduate school, this might be a good opportunity to write it as a journal article. And that's a completely valid format for this final research project. Let's say you're not really inspired by any of your coursework right now. Think beyond engineering. You can. What topics are you interested in? There's so much technical information out there. There's so much that's technical about topics that maybe aren't traditionally technical. And if you want to see some examples on the Canvas page, there's a sample final research project that is presented as a journal article for a film journal, not for an engineering journal. And this author, this student, she analyzed the different box office returns of young adult movies to see if she could, maybe over the last 20 years or so, see any trends in the young adult films and what type of film they were. And the idea is, do we have any information that will help us predict what's going to be the next big thing in young adult films? So, you might think like movies like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, what could possibly be technical about that? And she really found this element that was, data driven about it. And she went with it, and it was very cool. There's another one about, it's called The Rise of Taiwanese Identity. And this student took a look at demographically surveys that have been done from different ages of the Taiwanese population and the sort of Taiwanese diaspora, and took a look at how they feel about their identity. Are they Taiwanese? Are they Chinese? And do they think Taiwan should be able to become its own independent government, its own independent country? And so that was really interesting. When he first proposed it, I thought, is this going to be technical enough? And he goes, oh, yeah. It's definitely going to be technical enough. Don't worry about it. And I didn't have to worry about it. As it turned out, he won the Tech Writing Award that year. So we nominate, each of us faculty, we nominate a few of the papers we've received in a calendar year. And as a whole faculty, we read the 20 or so papers that were nominated and take a look at them and decide. We vote, we get split into two groups. We vote on the ones that weren't our student. And then based on a tally of those votes, we take a look at the top few and really make some decisions. So if you're looking for motivation, maybe you are a really strong writer, maybe you have a really strong topic, maybe you just know where you're going and you're having a semester where you're thinking like, I'm just not feeling motivated to do an amazing job of this, especially if it gets to the end of the semester and your grade is already where you want it. Maybe that's a little bit of extra motivation. I do teach a whole lot of sections. I taught 2 summer sections. I teach hey Tucker, I'm doing a video right now.
Don't let me interrupt.
Okay, thanks. Um, so that was Professor Crone. He teaches a number of classes as well. So yeah, I do teach a number of sections of technical writing, so I don't get quite as many nominees per section because we don't want to overload with nominees. But you know, if you want to go for excellence, go for excellence. So let's see, what are some other examples of technical enough? There are some interesting things that people have done where they've identified a problem and kind of maybe taken a systems engineering approach to looking at it. During a pandemic, it's going to be a little bit different, but one example, and I believe I have this example up on Canvas, this student, she noticed that in Forest Park, the bicycle intersections with cars were really dangerous. So she was noticing all these near misses in Forest Park. And this was in 2008. And she decided to study it. So she went into Forest Park with her notebook and she logged bike-car interactions and which ones were near misses, which ones were totally perfect, no danger, whether there were any actual crashes. And she looked at a number of the different intersections to see what that looked like. And then she gathered up that information as well as some historical information she was able to get and some information she was actually able to get from the St. Louis Parks Department about a number of accidents that involved cars and bicycles. And she pulled it all together and created this really wonderful feasibility study, which is a type of recommendation report that she then was able to give to the St. Louis Parks Department. She was taking a look at four different possibilities for improving those bike-car intersections. And she said in the beginning of the report that there are a whole lot more options. What she was focusing on were the 4 simplest to do, cheapest, easiest. So, you know, there are all sorts of things you could do. You could build bike bridges that the cars go under. You could build car bridges that the bicycles go under. There's so many different things you could do. And what she looked at were some really simple solutions. One was textured crosswalks. They're like cobblestone, so they slow the cars down. One was raised crosswalks. So it's like a speed bump for the car, but it's a crosswalk for pedestrians and bicycles. And it would be, you know, heavily striped or whatever. One was 4-way stop signs, which is, I believe, the null set. That was what they had already. And then the 4th was, those offset barriers, where maybe I'm not doing this. Here, I'll do it like this, where they go, whoop, 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 whoop. And so you have to zigzag around them and it slows you down. And so she took a look at them on a lot of different criteria. So it's a really it's a really nice methodical way to look at them. But the cool thing about that paper, I think, is that she talked to the St. Louis Parks Department in order to get the information to do the report. But then they said, this is really cool. We're actually looking at this problem. Could you send us what you've written? And that was her audience for it. And she did send it to them. And I don't know how much of a difference it made, but they've changed the bicycle and car intersections since then. And she recommended, I believe, raised crosswalks, and I think they do have some of those. So maybe in some small way she made an actual difference, which is really cool. Another neat kind of systems engineering topic, and this was more like I identify a problem and then I just see if I can study it in some way. This student was looking at line length, queue length, at various coffee shops that he went to. And he was like, some coffee shops, they go pretty fast through the line. Sometimes you're waiting for a really long time. So he went to White-on-Hanley Starbucks from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., 5 days a week for 2 weeks. And at every minute on the minute, he logged how many people were in line. And his idea was to do a recommendation report for Starbucks to better train their employees to keep queue length down. What he discovered is that Starbucks, whatever they do to train their employees to do this, works great. So if there were 4 people in line at 1 minute, by 2 minutes later, all 4 of them were through the line. If there was 1 person in line, and that was the only person, the baristas might chat with that person for 2 or 3 minutes while the coffee's being made. They're not rushing that person through at all. So there's almost never 0 line length. They're taking that opportunity to be friendly and to take their time when the person is stuck there anyway waiting for their drink. But if there's a longer line, they're moving them through really fast. So he changed the audience to be other coffee shops in St. Louis. And it was like, take a look at what Starbucks is doing. And in a very nice way, it was this could teach us lessons about how to keep our line length down. So you can have fun with this. You can pick a topic that is just of interest to you. And I'll show you a number of different examples. You can also take a look at the example final presentations from these last few classes that I've taught, because they're presenting the research that they did for their paper. So even if I don't have their paper as an example, I've got their presentation as an example, and that might give you even more topic ideas. You are going to have an audience in mind for this. If it's a magazine article, have a type of magazine in mind. You might have an actual magazine in mind. So some of the examples you'll see are presented as if they're popular science articles or Time magazine articles or something like that. That's more of a general public. Popular Science is a science-interested general public, or Wired is a technology-interested general public. Yeah, so you might have a magazine like that in mind. You might just have a category of magazine in mind and you make up your own magazine title. Yeah, you might be like, well, I don't really want it to be Forbes. I want it to be people interested in the business of baseball. There's probably already a zillion magazines about the business of baseball. So let me think of something more obscure. But you can make up a magazine if you want, just to give yourself a target audience. If you're doing a proposal, an analytical report, a recommendation report, or feasibility study, you actually put the audience as part of your cover page. So it may be the head of the St. Louis Parks Department, or it may be Chancellor Martin. I did not change this assignment sheet to take out the anachronism that it still says Chancellor Wrighton. So there's your Easter egg there. Oops. It might be to a particular company. It might be to a government official, a senator, a mayor, city council. So there's a lot of different possibilities for audience, and I can help you with that as well. I've got some writing process stuff in here that'll give you an idea of how you might approach thinking about the topic. But I do think that just looking at some examples and seeing the range of things people have done is going to be helpful for you, just to choose what am I interested in. I had a student over the summer write about Chegg, which I had never heard of. And apparently a lot of your professors have not heard of Chegg. But but he wrote about Chegg, and it was very interesting. He actually surveyed a whole bunch of undergrads from WashU. He put out a survey and got a lot of undergraduate responses from the different schools at WashU. He wanted to see what were there trends, were engineering students using Chegg more often than the other schools. While he didn't get enough survey responses from some of the other schools to make a really hard conclusion, to make a really solid conclusion, because you need a pretty large sample size for that, he was able to get some preliminary ideas. Engineers do use Chegg a lot. And what does that mean and why? And so he really kind of dug in and took a look at some of the reasons they identified in the survey. He was able to use personal experience as well, some of the reasons that he had, used it, and the ways people use Chegg. So there are ways that students deem it pretty ethical, like I want to check a homework response, and the homework is ungraded, so I'm just trying to clarify for myself, versus using it for an online exam, which almost everybody answered the survey question that they agreed that that was unethical. But there's a lot of gray area in there. And so he was exploring almost the ethics of Chegg through taking a look at his peers and what they feel about it. And the idea is that this could be presented to a faculty, to learn a little bit more about why students are using the internet in ways that maybe the faculty members don't want them to. And if, as faculty members, we decide we don't want them using Chegg at all, we could put that in the syllabus if we knew what it was. And so it was very interesting. So, you can even ask yourself, like, after the pandemic started, people, I think, are using Chegg a whole lot more. I wonder what that's all about, and make a project out of it. So there are a lot of different possibilities. And I think just spend a little bit of the beginning of the semester, or the beginning of this class, exploring some of your ideas and interests. You might have an idea right away of what you want to do, or you might be floundering a bit and you're thinking, oh, I can't find something from a class that I'm all that interested in. There's a lot out there. You can do political stuff. Take a look at politics. Take a look at sports. Take a look at your interests, whatever they are. There might be something very interesting there that you can dig into, and use your engineering mind and bring your skills and your thoughts to bear on that topic and that information. Our subject librarian, Lauren Todd, can help you find stuff. There's a lot that's out there on a lot of different topics. If you're in some niche topic that's not engineering, like sports, like film, we have subject librarians at WashU who specialize in these things. So it's very accessible to you. If you're doing something that involves something legal, we have a law library, and we have librarians for that library. So there's quite a lot of resources we have. Don't flounder and spend a lot of time spinning your wheels trying to figure out how to find stuff. Make use of our librarians, because they're wonderful. So that's the overview of this project. It has two other little pieces. One is the proposal letter, which comes before it when you propose that topic to me or your final audience. The other, on the other side of this, is the final presentation, where you present your research to your classmates, and your classmates are the audience for that. And so you're kind of bookended by two other projects. The final research project itself is the biggest project in this class. It's the thing you're going to spend the most time on, and it's worth the most points. It's worth 200 points. So it's worth like twice as much as the other major papers and the final presentation. And that's because of the amount of work you put into it. You don't write it the night before and just be done with it. That is not how you write a paper like this. It's a long process, and it's a multi-step process. You're going to propose it. You're going to work on rough drafts. You're going to have me review rough drafts. You're going to have your classmates review rough drafts, so that by the time you're turning it in, it's something that you've been working on for a while. I would suggest picking your topic somewhat early. It doesn't have to be, right away, but somewhat early. I think, so I'm making this video in a fall semester. For a fall semester, end of October, / early November should be about where you want to make sure to lock in a topic. By mid-November, it's getting to the point where you really should be working on the paper, and you're going to have a presentation to put together as well. In a spring semester, right around spring break, maybe the end of March, you're going to want to have that topic locked in. Now, locked in is a little bit of a misnomer. Your topic will change slightly as your information comes in. You're going to realize, like that Starbucks example, oh, I can't make this a recommendation report to Starbucks because they're already doing a great job. I'm going to have to change my audience. Or maybe you start getting into it and the research takes you in a bit of a different direction. That's fine, as long as it's in the same category of topics, so you're not starting over. But don't start over in the last week or two with a brand new thing, unless it's a really dire circumstance. I think a lot of students who have had trouble with this paper and where things have gone wrong, it's because they start over with something new in the last week. Oh, I didn't like my first topic, so I'm going to change my mind. You can't do a good job of this paper in only a week. It really is the kind of thing that takes a longer time to write, to research, to think about, to organize, to draft, to make mistakes, and try again. You write it first. You go, this organization is terrible. I don't like the audience that I'm writing it for. I think it's too technical here and not technical enough here. There's so much to correct and to change when you're doing something like this that it does take time. And so I would suggest having your topic reasonably locked in around the time you propose this, around the time you turn in your proposal to me. And we will discuss that proposal if it's a feasible topic. If you need to change it right after you turn in the proposal, that's fine. But you don't want to wait till like Thanksgiving break or something like that. That is too late. So that's the overview of how the arc of this semester will go with this paper. Typically, the way this works is we work on a bunch of other papers and projects in the first half of the semester. And for the second half of the semester, essentially all you're doing has to do with this final research project. You're doing the project, the presentation, and every mini assignment has to do with one of those two things. So we're going to talk about doing one PowerPoint slide that might go in your presentation. We're gonna have a lot of mini things that are leading up to this, which is great. Another couple things to keep in mind. One is I am okay with you using a paper that you were using for another class, but you, by WashU's academic integrity policy, you have to get permission from both instructors. I'm giving you permission. This is on video. It's out there. You all know it. So you have my permission. You don't need written permission from me. I would suggest for the other professor, get written permission, like an email from them that says, I'm okay with you using some of the paper that you wrote in my class for another class. I have not had a student say that they asked a professor and that professor said no. So at least in these past, how many ever years I've been teaching this class, I've never heard of a professor who said no to that. I think usually they're very happy to have their student working on this for a technical writing class because it means it's going to be a better paper. But if you're using it for 2 classes at WashU or anywhere that you're getting credit for, you need to make sure to have written permission from the other instructor, and then you have video permission from me. And it may not be the whole same project. It may be some paragraphs are the same or something like that. You still need that kind of permission. You're not supposed to turn in the same work for 2 classes unless we all say it's okay. If you're doing it for something that's not a class, though, like your lab, you don't need permission based on WashU's academic integrity policy. If you are writing it for your lab, though, I would get your PI's permission because it's proprietary information and you really should make sure that your PI is okay with you writing it. But that's less of an academic integrity thing. That's more of a you want to keep your job kind of thing. So, if you're doing something for a student group or something like that, you don't have to get express permission to use it in two places. It's just if it's two classes, two things that you're getting credit for at a university or a high school. If it's something that you started working on in high school and you want to revisit it, you have to dig back into your archive and find that high school teacher's name and an email address and get in touch with them and make sure that you have permission to reuse some of that. So that's a note on academic integrity. If I had a second thing, I forgot what it was. It will pop up in another video for sure. If it was important, it might be about the proposal letter, it might be about the final presentation. But that is the overview of this project. It should get you started. I'm excited to see what your ideas are, and I'm going to be working with you a lot on it. You're going to be working with peers a lot on it. So this is not something that you just sit in your ivory tower and work on in an isolated way. It's very collaborative in the idea of you get to talk out your ideas, you get to get feedback from people. And so in that way, it's a lot more like the real world. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing what you all come up with. Thanks.